Resinello, and man, are we in the breach? I mean, this is really getting crazy, and there's a lot of stuff that we're not going to really speculate on all that much, but because there's a lot of rumors going on out there and everything else. All I'm saying is this, though. I'm kind of like, what did St. Paul say? Girding your loins, right? I'm girding my loins because I just have a feeling something's going to happen this week. I don't know what it is. I'm not a one for conspiracies. If I say something, it's because, and Joe's the same way, it's because there's evidence for it, not like the fake news media when they talk about, oh, that's just conspiracy theory. We're not that. But there's a lot of stuff going on out there. For the purpose of this Frontline with Joe and Joe, we are going to keep it with this premise in mind, that right now, Joe Biden will be the president on January 21st. Now, Joe and I have said in a very short period of time, something's going to happen to him, something crazy, and Kamala's going to be our president. But we're going with Trump won't be president on January 21st. But I will say this, I'm not going to be shocked if something crazy happens, nor will Joe, because this has been the craziest year, all right? And just because we're in 2021 doesn't mean that 2020 ended. So the jury's out. But one thing we will say is this, and I'm sure many of you saw the title for this video, okay? So Joe Biden is president. Evidently, that's what, hey, the Associated Press said it. So I guess it has to be true. And Jake Tapper said it. And Brian Stelter said it. So I'm sure it has to be true because Brian Stelter said it. Anyway, okay, we're just, for the purpose of our show tonight, we know we're in a battle, whether Trump's the president or not, okay? And we have a number of stories that we want to talk about tonight. Very important. Joe and I are going to stay on Facebook and YouTube until we reach a wide enough audience on alternative, or what right now is alternative social media, which we're going to build up our presence there on MeWe, Parler, Rumble, and the whole 9 yards. We're staying on Facebook and YouTube, okay, for now, until either that happens or they kick us off. If Zuckerberg says
he just may,
he may, he doesn't like a couple of Catholic guys like us, Trump supporters. Okay, he's the fifth richest man in the world, so he's an oligarch. Okay, so we know that he's not going to really like us too much. But having said all that, okay, we need to remember that we need to secure, as Dr. E. Michael Jones has told us and many other people, we need to explore and secure lines of communication. We are attempting to do that in our small way. We're hoping, and we know that others are going to do the same thing, and hopefully we can have a unified, whether it's social media or whether it's a dedicated website, something where big tech cannot interfere with us. That's going to take some doing. There's a lot smarter people that agree with all of us and all of you, okay, out there, who have the connections, who can raise the money, who could support maybe legally the Parlers of the world and the MeWes and the Rumbles. We'll see what happens. But we're here right now, and while we're here, we would ask you, please like, share, subscribe, do all that fun stuff with our videos, both on YouTube and Facebook, and please do the same with Holy Faith Media. Many of you right now are watching us on Holy Faith Media. We love you all. So just to give you a quick rundown, the name of the show is A Time for Choosing. Joe Resinello, I think it's important to realize that choices, and we're going to talk about that, okay? Choices are going to have to be made. Very briefly, just to give you a quick rundown, the media is a bunch of liars. We all know that. But we're going to expose their hypocrisy, too. You're going to want to hear that, particularly when it comes to violence in America. We have an article by David Marcus in the Federalist. The riots have entered the Capitol, and the center will not hold. It's a really good article. We think you, as our audience, you're going to enjoy it because it goes much deeper than that. The rich are just getting richer, Joe Resinello.
That's the truth.
All right? They're just getting richer. And guess what? They're all leftists. The top five, when you look at it, Bill Gates, Dorsey, well, the mutant might not be as rich as them yet. But when you look at them, Bezos and Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and these people, Elon Musk, okay? The leftists are all the rich guys now, okay? We used to be told that all the rich people were all on the right. Well, not anymore. We have a Ivy League professor, Glenn Lowry.
Actually, two,
John McWhorter, too, right? James McWhorter or John McWhorter, talking about the black liberal establishment is basically bluffing. When it comes to all their charges of racism and everything else, there's bluffing, and he gives us some really good insight about how we could call their bluff. And we might have a couple other stories if we get to it. Having said all that, okay, we need to choose, and Joe Resinello is going to tell you what I'm talking about.
And that's very true. Biden will be the president very soon. And if you're Catholic, as Joe said, it is time to choose. The political crisis in the United States that we're now facing brings us into the open, a contest for the soul of our country. As important as this recent election was, the stakes transcend particular political arrangements. They go to the fundamental issues about which each of us must make a choice and take a stand.
That's right.
There's been a force quietly at work in our country, in plain sight, that has been gradually taken basically over the ideological control of most of our institutions, businesses, and the media, and even our culture. And as Joe said, we have to make a choice. There is no longer sitting on the fence. I got news for you. We've already crossed the Rubicon, Joe and I. That's why we're continuing on. I mean, we've already crossed the Rubicon and we've made our choice. You have to make yours too. You have to make a choice. You know, ultimately, we all choose heaven or hell. You know, that's the truth. You make a choice.
I learned that in my faith journey. For a long time, I was under a misconception that God sends you to hell. No, he doesn't.
You send
yourself to hell. God gives you every opportunity to embrace his love and his mercy and his grace, okay, in this life, okay? And many people just choose to reject it.
Well,
it's like slapping it away. It's like your father's trying to feed you something good, and you're slapping his hand away.
But even like what's going on now, I don't know how anyone who's objective that could be for what's going on. I'll be honest with you. It's absolutely, not only is it un-American, it goes against the fundamental human rights of all people.
Remember who's the most outspoken critic of this force you're talking about. Joe's talking about Marxism, okay? In other words, and we talk about this on the show all the time. All right, we had a conversation with Dr. Ed Maza. I'm gonna post that video tomorrow on YouTube and Facebook, okay? Where we're talking about, this is not like Joe McCarthy. Nothing against Joe McCarthy. This is not like Joe McCarthy waving a book saying, I got the names of 200 communists. The Catholic Church has clearly condemned communism from very soon after its inception. Why are we shocked when guys like us and many other people say, this is Marxism and it's evil? I've said on this show before, communism is an international criminal conspiracy. That's what it is. That's what it always has been. From Marx, even preceding Marx, there's elements of that you can find in the French Revolution, but from Marx right up until the 1920s in the Soviets, 1917 in the Soviet Revolution, all right? And what have we talked about on the show? Gramsci's long march through the institutions. What's Joe talking about? What is this force in our country? Gradual, like Antonio Gramsci said. It's the long march through academia, through the government, through the church. Unfortunately for us as Catholics, okay? The church was primary in this communist takeover, okay? The media. Haven't they shown you just in the last year exactly what they're capable of? And the fact is, if you disagree, your kids can't go to Harvard, so they control academia. You can't go even on Fox News, which used to be considered conservative, right? That's what we're told. We just mentioned the richest people in this country are all leftists. They're all oligarchs. They've taken over everything. Am I right, Joe Resinello?
There's no question. And as Joe said, the left's economic model is an evil system. It has destroyed civilizations and the good traditions and cultural heritage of many countries. Let's break down the left's, what they're teaching in three basic words. It's struggle, materialism, and give me a chance and I'll explain that, and atheism. Struggle.
Now it's important for everybody to listen because these are the basic tenets. These are the fundamental pillars of Marxism and why we as Catholics and all people of goodwill need to say no to this onslaught that we're facing. We need to stand up to it and we need to fight the fight. Go ahead, Joe.
And think about when I say this is the left's teaching, and we're going to break it down in three words. Think about what you have seen in the streets and heard in the rhetoric as I say basically these three words and explain them to you. Struggle, it involves fighting to get one's way. The fighting may be physical or psychological. In any case, law and truth are set aside for the sake of power. Materialism, it involves understanding ourselves from the bottom up. Humanity is described as a collection of desires, such as hunger, fear, and lust. Higher things, such as conscience or spirituality, are not recognized. And atheism, it involves denying the existence of God. With that denial, humanity loses the morality and true independence that come with belief. That is everything that platform is about.
Right, and let's break it down. Let's break it down a little bit. Let's talk about struggle. What did you see all summer long?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
The oligarchs were prompting these useful idiots, because that's what Antifa and Black Lives Matter are. They're useful idiots to go out on the street and go cause problems. Remember, George Orwell wrote about this in 1984. War is peace. The communists need struggle. They need perpetual strife, perpetual war. That's how they keep their power. Oh, we have an enemy over there. Don't vote me out of office. Don't depose me. Don't turn on me. That's the way they operate. So struggle is central. But let's talk about materialism, because that's an important one. People forget who exactly Karl Marx was a big fan of. He was also a big fan of Charles Darwin. Again, you see how all these ideologies, all these systems of thought, they all fit in together. They're very useful for evil people. Okay, Darwinism teaches that you're nothing. That's what that's what the modern atheists who call themselves neo-Darwinists, that's what they say. You're nothing. You're nothing but a glob of cells. You came from a cell that somehow, some way, through some accident, was created on the earth, and then that one cell started to replicate, and then we have all the life that we see on earth. Of course, there's no evidence for this. They'll tell you that there's not. There's no evidence for this, okay? Evolution is a hoax, just like climate change is a hoax, okay? But remember but ultimately what it's about. It's about materialism. And Marx picked up on that. So he saw the material, as opposed to Hegel, who saw the spiritual movement of history. Marx was a materialist, okay? But why should that concern us as Catholics? Because the Catholic Church has always taught that all human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. That all of us are directly created by God. The atheists can't have that. The communists can't have that. They have to make you believe that you're worthless. And they've been wildly successful at doing so. When you look at what you read, didn't you read about the hunger, how everything that we do is all about hunger and fear and base instinct.
But keep this in mind, this is not going to be successful. Man has his hour, but God will have his day. It's no question. This has been tried and this has failed. It's a question of how long will it last. But getting back to the choosing for all Catholics and people of goodwill, listen to what I'm saying.
By the way, Barbara is in the chat room. She's watching us right now. Facebook will not let her share this video. Now, again, we're a couple of small fried Jamoke Goomba Italian Americans from North Jersey who are speaking the truth, okay? Who are growing our audience. They won't let one of our followers share our video. Now, you see where they're going with all this. Go ahead, Joe.
Basically, Americans can choose honesty instead of fraud, personal responsibility instead of socialism, truth and freely reported news over propaganda and censorship, and belief over atheism. That choice is yours. And I got news for you. Speaking objectively, this platform is nothing but propaganda and basically taking away your rights as Americans. And by the way, this is the short-sightedness of all this. I was talking to my wife about it. Do you remember Harry Reid when he changed the rules with regard to the Supreme Court? It used to be 60 votes to get a Supreme Court justice. Then it turned into 50. Who did it work against? Them.
Right.
Right? Donald Trump got 3 Supreme Court justices.
And a whole lot of other judges.
Correct.
Before Harry Reid did that, every one of those judges would have needed 60 votes. Every single one.
What put Donald Trump in the position that he's in now? It was COVID. Now, that was not something that basically, it wasn't a man-made situation. I mean, one could debate that it happened in China and then they released it. Maybe it did, but I'm not going to go there. What I'm saying is it was almost like an act of God. It was a disease, and it basically put him out of office. Basically, if there was no COVID, Donald Trump wins easily. The economy was flying.
Well, he did win easily.
No, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know how, because keep in mind, 100,000 votes, every one of these states, it was a razor-thin margin that he lost in. 100,000 votes across 3 swing states, Donald Trump's the president. So, I mean, COVID is basically what tossed him out. Just to throw something up in the air, what if another crisis comes up during the Biden administration?
Or don't you think they're going to create one?
No, but how's this sound? What if it was a terrorist act? There was no terrorism that took place during Donald Trump's
Because
administration.
Trump killed them all.
I was talking to my neighbor who's a state trooper, and he said that paring down all the police forces, particularly in New York City, leaves our country very vulnerable. And if you're a terrorist, wouldn't that be? We have many enemies across the seas. Wouldn't it be a good time to attack the United States? So say it happens, okay? I don't want it to happen, so please don't misunderstand me. But say it does, and it is a foreign nation that does it, because we do have many enemies. Keep that in mind.
Right.
Under Donald Trump, there was no terrorism, because they knew damn well if they did, they were going to get their you-know-whats kicked. So say that happens. You can't blame Donald Trump. The country could turn on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris just as easily as they turned on Donald Trump with COVID. You see, God is in control, so I'm not going to worry. God knows what he's doing. So sit back and follow the program. What's the program? Personal holiness. Live a sacramental life.
That's what a lot of people are saying in the,
And
in
that
the chat
is
room
what
right
you
now.
do.
Right.
And that is what you do. God is in control. When he wants this scourge of a regime out, he'll get it out as fast as he permitted it to come in.
Do you want to hear something funny? You want to hear quickly? You guys might get a kick out of this. My wife and I, at times we attend spiritual direction together because we're a married couple, okay? And we take the faith seriously. We want to make sure we're doing the right thing. But it was real funny because my wife, who's not a conspiracy nut, but my wife is thinking in her mind, and we've alluded to it before on the show. I'm not saying this is the end times, but I wouldn't be shocked if it is, okay? So my wife was asking our spiritual director about it, right? She says, Father, what do we do? I mean, you know, like we have all this and you know, they're going to have unchecked power. The Democrat Party is so evil. They're not a Democrat Party. They're the Marxist Party of America. But our spiritual director was kind of funny. He said, what are you going to do about it? And I thought it was a perfect answer because he was absolutely right. And he followed up with what Joe just said and what many people are saying in our chat room right now. What are you going to do about it? Now, let me say this. Joe and I, we are not looking for political solutions to our problem. Now, there are many people who are, and these are not, I don't think, solutions that the solutions you're going to find are not political because that's not our problem. That's a symptom of our problem, okay? And we're not going to sit at home only praying. We're going to pray. We pray every day. There's got to be a middle ground. Tell the men at Lepanto, okay, to just sit there and pray on their knees and pray the rosary while the Muslims are coming on the ships to overtake Europe. No, they had to pray, go to confession, receive Jesus in the Eucharist, and then go out and fight. And that's our stance. Now, we're not talking about violence. We're talking about fighting. Right now, the greatest revolutionary act you could commit is to open your mouth. Zuckerberg has told you that. Dorsey has told you that. Pinchai has told you that. They've all told you that. The solution is to pray, stay close to Jesus, stay close to his grace, stay close to Our Lady, all right? She's the one who warned us about all this stuff. Stay close to Our Lady, all right? And get ready to fight because it is coming. It's here now. We're just going to see. Tim Gordon made a good point on his show. He goes, forget about the first 100 days. I'm worried about the first 100 hours. You know what I'm saying? I think he's onto something because they're going to move swiftly. We think they're going to move swiftly.
Like I said, our goal is to remain faithful, and that's why we're still here doing our thing. My job isn't the success part. That's God's job. Our job is to be faithful, and being faithful is living the truth, speaking the truth, following Christ, living a sacramental life, having a prayer life, striving for holiness, and in doing so, we'll change the culture.
That's right.
That's all I can do, and that's exactly what I'm going to do.
And remember, what it comes down to is what Joe said earlier. This is a choice. The choice is not Republican, Democrat. The choice is not conservative, liberal. The choice is good versus evil. And good with a capital G is Jesus Christ. We need to stay close and make the choice to stay close to him. And then the consequences be damned, because you know when you're with Jesus, you won. You're the winner. Okay? And try to bring as many people along with you that you can. And that's why Joe and I are going to continue to open our mouth on the front line with Joe and Joe. And we go live 8 o'clock every Sunday night. Tonight, we're going across a number of different platforms, particularly Facebook and YouTube. Follow, like, share, subscribe. We beg you to do that, okay? Is to get the message out there as we determine how we're going to establish secure lines of communication. And please follow Holy Faith Media. Many of you do already. Follow Holy Faith Media, like, subscribe, and share on there. So let's get into some nitty-gritty, okay?
The riots. We got to talk the riots.
Yeah, we got to talk about the riots, because I'm sorry, it's a put-up job, okay? It's clear as a bell. If there was no evidence, I'd keep my mouth shut. But there's plenty of evidence. I mean, you got 500,000 people on the mall listening to Donald Trump, and you got 3 cops in front of the Capitol. Well, and that's one thing. But let's say for argument's sake, that there was the report was that there was between 300,000 and 500,000 people that showed up to see Trump's speech. Okay, let's say it was 3,000 Trump supporters, no Antifa, no Black Lives Matter, 3,000 Trump supporters that created this violence. Okay, that's 1%. Now, to me, that sounds like a mostly peaceful protest. That's what we were told over the summer. So let's assume that it was all Trump supporters, but let's talk about the hypocrisy that's going on here, Joe Resinello.
Before we get into some of the stuff that basically the left said regarding the riots, I want to talk a little bit about Tucker Carlson.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Okay. Tucker Carlson basically had a great monologue this week. After the show, check it out. I think
don't leave the front line with Joe and Joe.
It's very noteworthy, and I want to read to you some of the excerpts from it, and then I think it'll spark a very interesting discussion.
I do want to say this real quick. Tom Gugliotta's in the chat room. He says, apart from St. Joseph, these are my 2 favorite Joes.
Thank you, brother.
Tom, you put us in really good company, my brother. Tom, share our videos. Share them all with your friends, family, everybody. Go ahead, Joe.
This is what Carlson had to say. He said, as long as people sincerely believe that they can change things by voting, they stay calm. They don't storm the Bastille. They don't burst into the House chamber. They talk, they organize, and they vote. But the opposite is also true if people begin to believe that their democracy is fraudulent. If they conclude that voting is a charade, that the system is rigged and it's run in secret by a small group of powerful, dishonest people who are acting in their own interest, then God knows what could happen. Actually, we do know what can happen. It's happening right now. It's happened in countless other countries over countless centuries, and the cycle is always the same because human nature never changes. Let me stop there and just talk a little bit about that.
He's spot on, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, people, whether the press likes it or not, do not believe that the election was fair. Do you know how many people who are very smart, well into the summer, well before November, said that the Democrats were playing with fire with this mail-in ballot situation? Do you know that Jimmy Carter and James Baker ran a study? You can't even find it on Google anymore.
Right. You see how they're suppressing information?
These are Democrats. It doesn't get any more like blue than Jimmy Carter, who basically said that mail-in ballots are susceptible to fraud. This was, I believe, in 1982. I actually tried to look it up and read it myself. You can't even find it.
No. I think it was more recent than that. You're talking about the Baker. No. That was within the last 10 to 15 years.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Then I'm wrong. But those 2 gentlemen did it. So it wasn't conservatives that did the study. You can't find it on Google anymore. The point of the matter is, whether they like it or not, whether you could point to evidence, and by the way, that's the wrong question. Don't point to the fraud. Point to what happened before the election.
That's right.
They took away the controls. That's what has to be pointed to. They took away the controls, and they also, by executive decree by governors, usurped legislation that was voted upon. You can't do that.
Right. Well, and the Supreme Court
Wouldn't take the
wouldn't
case.
take the case.
So
when you look at the cause of all this, you can lay it right at the feet of John Roberts. So when John Roberts, the rumor is, and the report was that he was yelling, they heard him yelling through the door at the conservative justices on the Supreme Court, saying, what are you going to do when there's rioting in the street? Well, now my question to you, Chief Justice Roberts, what are you going to do now that there's rioting? Because of your actions, because you disenfranchised the people of Pennsylvania, because the state legislature of Pennsylvania filed a suit months before the election and said the governor and the secretary of state are acting outside of their powers.
and they wouldn't take
And
it.
they wouldn't take the case, and they were the only ones who should have been able to take that case, who were should rightfully have taken that case. All the violence right now could have been stemmed by that, because then other states would have it would establish a precedent for other states. And governors in other states wouldn't have been able to do it, and secretaries of state in other states wouldn't have been able to do it. John Roberts is to blame for all this.
So again, you're asking the wrong question. It's not the fraud, because what they now say is it wasn't systematic fraud. They admit that, and they always say in every election there's some fraud. It wasn't enough to turn the election. That's not where I'm focusing. I'm focusing on what happened, and that's what before the election. By the way, that's what they're going to try to do, this administration, during this 4-year term, especially in the next 2 years. They're going to try to cement their power. How? They're going to try to make D.C., and Tucker talks about this as well, they're going to try to make D.C. and Puerto Rico states. They're going to take away the filibuster. They're going to try to pack the court if they can get away with it, and if they feel enough Democratic senators will go along with it, because some might not. But the point of the matter is, what Tucker is saying, when people feel confident in the election, right? They don't behave this way.
That's right.
But they don't feel comfortable. 58% of the American people believe that there was some element of fraud in this election. 20 to 30% of them are Democrats.
Very important. And by the way, just to dovetail on what you're saying, okay, I remember distinctly screaming at the TV when Barack Obama was elected in 2008, okay? The next day I woke up, had my coffee, had my bacon, egg, and cheese, okay, at the diner, okay? And the first thought that came into my head was, all right, well, he'll go too far to the left, and in 2 years we'll get the House and we'll get the Senate. What happened in 2 years? We got the House and we got in 2010 we got the House, and then in 2012 I believe we got the Senate. Okay, and it stayed that way. My point is, I had trust in the elections. I trusted that if I voted against Barack Obama, and others did, at least as far as 2 years after he got inaugurated, then I had confidence in the system. That if he played it in the middle, then maybe there wouldn't have been a reaction. He obviously didn't with Obamacare, and there was a swift reaction from the Tea Party and others, and they came and we took the House back. Republicans took the House back in 2010. Can you trust that now? That's what Tucker Carlson is saying. That's why there's frustration, because you say, okay, it's Joe Biden. They have the House, they have the Senate. We'll do our best to fight against them. But in 2022, he'll completely lose the House, and then there'll be a check on his power. Tucker Carlson is saying what we said and what many of you are already thinking, and many out there in social media are saying. We cannot trust the elections. We can blame Rhino Republicans for not exposing this in their respective states, and these people are brazen. They're going to do it again. And no, I do not trust the election. And Tucker's point, when people don't trust the system, we're not advocating violence, ever. But when people don't trust the system, you can't look far to understand why they act violently. Because you've disenfranchised them.
And that's why it didn't shock me in the least what happened on January 6th. It didn't shock me in the least, and it shouldn't shock you. It shouldn't shock you. But let me go on, because I think he had a lot of very good things to say, and it'll spark a lot of very good conversation. He says, "Listen to us," screams the population. "Shut up and do what you're told," replied the leaders. In the face of dissent, the first instinct of illegitimate leadership is to crack down on the population. But crackdowns never make it better. Instead, they always make the country more volatile and more dangerous. The people in charge rarely understand that. They don't care to listen or learn because of all the conversations are referendums on them and their leadership. So they clamp down harder. Obey, I tell you, obey. This is the Romanoff program. It ends badly every time. But that doesn't mean they won't try it again. Of course they will, because it's their nature. It's how we got here in the first place. Millions of Americans sincerely believe the last election was fake. You can dismiss them as crazy. You can call them conspiracy theorists. You can kick them off Twitter, but you won't change their minds. Rather than trying to change their minds to convince them and reassure them that the system is real, that the democracy works as you would do if you cared about the country or the people who live here, our leaders will try to silence them. What happened on January 6th will be used, and it has been, by people taking power to justify and strip your rights from you, and we've already seen it.
Right.
Your right to speak without being censored, your right to assemble, to be spied upon, to make a living, to defend your family most critically. These are the most basic and ancient freedoms that we have. They're why we live here in the first place. That's why we're proud to be Americans.
That's why people have fought and died for this country, because they believed that the system was a good system. What he's saying, I'm sorry, we don't believe that anymore. Go ahead, Joe.
They're what make us different. They are now in peril. When thousands of your countrymen storm the Capitol building, you don't have to like it. We don't like it. We were horrified, and it's wrong. But if you don't bother to pause and learn a single thing from it, from your citizens storming your Capitol building, then you're a fool. You lack wisdom and you lack self-awareness. You have no place running a country. We got it. We got to this sad, chaotic day for a reason, and it's not your fault. It's theirs.
It's theirs. Real quick, Ed's in the chat room. He said, are y'all on Parler and Rumble? We are right now. Our producer, Jonathan Ross at Holy Faith Media, set up our Frontline with Joe and Joe page on Parler, okay, at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. You'll see our ugly mugs there. So, and we would encourage, I'm sorry, I was remiss earlier. I forgot to mention that. Please follow us on Parler. The more we grow our audience there, the more we wean off Facebook and YouTube. I would recommend that every American needs to examine what TV they watch, where they spend their money. This is going to be a conversation.
We got rid of our TV. I don't have it anymore.
And I use mostly just the smart TV for YouTube. In other words, and it's YouTube right now until the people I watch start to have more of a Rumble presence, and then I'm going to watch it all on Rumble, and I'm going to ditch YouTube. And I'll never go on YouTube again. I'll never go on Facebook again. I only use Facebook anyway for Frontline with Joe and Joe. I don't put any personal stuff on there. I don't let them use me as a commodity. We all need to do that. Why? What Joe is saying is so important, all right? Because think about it this way. We have a system where on certain fundamental things, we used to agree, okay? We used to almost, like, we had a system where, all right, Democrats want higher taxes, Republicans want lower taxes. One wants to emphasize business, one wants to emphasize labor. There were things you could compromise about, okay? And people respected the system. People liked the system. You win one day, you lose the next. It's good. It's back and forth, and it keeps the government in check. That's all gone. It's all gone. Don't think for a second you live in America. I forgot. I think it was Mary in the chat room said, hey, Dan, real quick, Dan's here. I haven't seen him in a while. Be ready for Parler to experience outage starting tonight. Yeah, well, you already can't download the app, but you can go on, let's say, Google and look it up and then sign in that way. But hopefully somebody does something about that, because now it's blatant. But the thing is, this is the system that people fought and died for. If people in New Jersey do things a certain way that people in Arkansas don't like, fine. It's called states' rights. If rights that are not in the Constitution are reserved for the states and the people, then fine. Then you don't make up rights. That's reserved for the states. See, we have 50 individual republics, and then we have our federal government, okay? That's all gone. It's all gone. You don't live in, it's called America. It's called the United States of America, but it's not the United States of America. This is not what people fought and died for. They didn't fight so that big tech and corporations and a bunch of rich people could take away your right to free speech. If they want to, they could shut us down like that. If Donald Trump went on TV tonight, they could shut him down like that. Nobody will see it. Nobody will see it. This is not America. And that's why, in our earlier segment, we said we have to choose. If we value the place we live, and I assume that whether it's the America we knew or something better, we're going to have to fight for that. We're going to have to choose. And if we don't include Jesus Christ in that calculation when we're going through it, if you're looking for political solutions, we're doomed. We are doomed. That's it.
That's why just put your faith in God. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I learned a lot of lessons as a result of the Trump administration. I think a lot of Catholics did. I mean, obviously, my trust is in Christ, but I trusted that Donald Trump was going to do a lot more than he basically did or was able to do. Listen, he's not going to be the president. I mean, barring some freak thing, literally like lightning striking from the sky.
It may very well happen.
Well, anything could happen, but at the end of the day, I'm not counting on that. And what I'm counting on is Jesus Christ. I am solely counting on Christ, and ultimately the truth always prevails, and it will again. It's just a matter of time, and it works for a greater good. As I said in the first segment, my job is to be faithful. But I want to talk a little bit about the left here, who excused rioting all summer. I mean, that's why I wasn't shocked what happened on January 6th. Basically, that's what happens when you justify street violence, which is political, which basically went on all summer long. All summer long.
But think about how the precursor to this, okay? Steve Scalise got shot. A Bernie Sanders supporter went to a baseball field, asked the guy sitting in the parking lot, are those the Republicans? The guy said, yeah, it's the Republican congressional baseball team. Good. Went out there, started shooting people. Steve Scalise got shot and almost died. And they excused it. Joy Reid actually excused it by saying, or gave a reason for him being shot, saying, well, he is anti-choice and anti-marriage equality. She said that. Okay? So the violence preceded the COVID violence and the George Floyd violence that happened over the summer. Okay? They already laid the groundwork for this. They'll excuse anybody getting shot or hurt or hit in the head with a pipe or pepper sprayed in their face. This is what they are. They are Marxist media. Why do we have to keep saying this to people? This is the Marxist media. They excuse all of the violence on the left. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, let's talk a few examples of what they excused all summer long. Because clearly they're trying to paint this narrative as, Donald Trump is dangerous. The right is dangerous. Look what they did. And listen, I'm not excusing the violence. To be honest with you, it's just going to be used against us. They control the media. They control the narrative. It's not the way to do things. I mean, I do think, as a person of common sense, I don't know how those people got into that building. To be honest with you, just guy coming from New Jersey who's been around the block a few times, if I was there, I'll tell you why I would not have gone in the building, because I would have thought I would have been shot dead on the spot.
Yeah.
So I would not have gone anywhere near that door, because like common sense tells me you go in that door, they're putting a bullet in your head. How they got in, that's just me. From, guy, like I said, who lives 10 miles outside of New York, and I've been around the block once or twice. I don't know how they got in. Another story. But now, obviously,
3 cops were standing there. They let them in. You see them on videotape. That's one of the reasons why they're trying to control social media, because people could take a video. If you spit on the sidewalk, somebody's taking a video of it and they're posting it on Twitter. You got a couple of cops there. They're letting them in. We already have they've identified Antifa. There's 2 guys that are clear as day. They're Antifa. The guy with the horns and the little fat guy with the beard. Okay? They're both Antifa. Their pictures are all over the internet. Why do you think Twitter and Facebook and the rest of them are trying to suppress this? But having said that, if you were a Trump supporter, like Joe said, you should have realized, I ain't going in that building.
No way.
Okay? Now, as much as I love the idea of congressmen and senators cowering under their desks, I ain't going in that building.
No way. No way. And like I said, just common sense. How they got in is another story. But I have my doubts on how they got in so easily. But I'm not going to go there. What I am going to talk about is what the left did all summer, because now they're making themselves sound like they were saints. This is what they said on a couple of instances that took place throughout the summer.
Now, you got to catch this. And this is not an exhaustive list, by the way, okay? We don't have enough time to talk about all of them. This is only a handful of the outrageous things they said, that now they're applying a different standard when it comes to the riots that happened last week.
Kamala Harris urged followers to cover rioters' bail. Chris Cuomo
This is the one that bothers me more than anything. Go ahead, Joe.
said the following. Who said protests were supposed to be peaceful?
And he's Ivy League educated. And he can't read the Constitution. The Constitution says peaceful protest.
MSNBC reporter describes fiery scene as mostly a protest.
Mostly a protest. While the building is about to fall down behind him, that's on camera. The place is burning down, and he's got the stones to say, oh, it's mostly a protest.
Democratic National Convention refuses to condemn riots.
No shock there.
Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times writer, for the record, Nicole Hannah-Jones, who's the architect of the 1619 Project. Basically, she said the following: destroying property isn't violence.
Unless it's her house. Get it? Unless it's her business or her house that's getting burned down or her property that's getting destroyed. I bet she'll consider it violence then.
CNN's Don Lemon compares...
It's Lemon, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We can't get away from that. It's Don Lemon. Go ahead.
Compares leftist riots to the Boston Tea Party.
So a bunch of little girls, okay, and a bunch of half men are out there with masks and everything else, okay, with pepper spray and pipes and bicycle locks and all this stuff. And he's going to compare these little girls to the men at the Boston Tea Party.
MSNBC's Joy Reid said the following: BLM riots are really just undercover white supremacists causing trouble.
Now, here's the thing, what she's right about. Most BLM rank and file are white. 5 out of 6 BLM
That's
members
true.
are white. Now, she's wrong. She's wrong about white nationalists causing trouble. No. They cause enough trouble on their own, Joy. You're wrong. You're stupid.
Seattle mayor on anarchists taking control of the downtown area of the city. Don't be afraid of democracy.
So what they did in Seattle...
2 people, I think 2 kids died.
What's her name?
Teenagers.
What's her... Right.
She resigned.
Right. So 2 kids died, and that she's saying, don't be afraid of
The
democracy.
police chief died, Carmen Best. She didn't die. She resigned.
Who was the mayor? Jenny Durkin?
I'm not
So
sure.
lesbian Notre Dame graduate. That's Jenny Durkin, the mayor of Seattle, says with the riots and 2 people getting shot, 2 young kids getting shot, okay, and killed. Don't be afraid of democracy. That's democracy. Democracy took place on election night, and 80 million people voted for Donald Trump. Don't you be afraid of democracy, but evidently the leftists are, because they knew that Trump was going to hand them their ass. Pardon my language.
Pelosi, when the mobs tore down statues, people will do what they do.
All right, so the people did what they did at the Capitol. You disenfranchised them, Mrs. Pelosi. So people will do what they, according to your standard, they were just doing what people do.
And Vox reported, woke riots are scary but productive, while the Capitol riots were devastating.
So at least the Vox, you know, they're not as hypocritical, because they're telling you flat out, we don't. Yeah, the right wing violence is devastating, but the left wing violence are scary, but productive. Show me anything productive that came out of those riots from BLM and Antifa. Minneapolis is a ghost town, okay? A ghost town.
Well, actually,
okay?
if something was productive, they scared people. That was what it was meant to do. You see, this was all organized. And the second it started to work against them, it stopped. It magically stopped.
My wife just said that she just texted me and she said, don't call people stupid. So I take back calling anybody stupid. My wife is a great moderating force. This is why all people should get married in the Catholic Church, because all men need to get married, because a wife is a proper moderating influence sent by God Almighty himself. Okay. And I'm not joking. So I am going to take back calling whoever I called. I called Jenny Durkin stupid. I take that back, Jenny.
No, but like I said, all of this, that's why an objective person, step back for a moment. Why are you surprised what happened on June 6th? Why? I'm not at all.
Right.
I'm not surprised at all, and you shouldn't be either. I don't excuse it, but I'm not surprised.
Wait, on what?
No,
on
about
January. I'm sorry.
January 6th. But even like this has been going on for months. Months. The press pretended like this was the first time some type of incident was to take place at a protest. This has been going on for months.
Right.
30 to 40 people have been killed, one of which was David Dern. who had 5 children and like 13 grandchildren, who was a retired cop. He was a black man, and by all accounts was a good man.
And the guy, the thug who shot him, as he lay dying, put it on social media.
And his grandchild saw it live. This has been going on for months.
Well, that's productive, Joe. According to Vox, that's scary, but it's productive.
And again, this is where I when I see I had no respect for the media before this. It's propaganda,
right.
All of it. You know, it's funny. I was talking to my wife about like the freedom of speech and freedom of the press. What a privilege. Because in a lot of countries, you sincerely don't have that, particularly the press. The government controls the press. But in a sense, it's the same thing here. It's a wing of the power in the government. It's a propaganda machine. Like if you go to Saudi Arabia, the press is a propaganda machine. If you go to North Korea, the press is a propaganda machine. It's the same thing here.
Well, welcome to 2021. The press has been and is now really ramping up because they feel emboldened, okay? Especially when you include big tech in with the press, okay? That's all it is now. It's all propaganda. I don't listen to anything I see. Any news headline that comes across when I happen to be going on my phone for something, I don't believe any of it. I don't. I focus on those people who I trust, who gained my trust, okay, because they've been right about things, okay. Mike Church, we're on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. We would encourage everybody to go on Mike Church and do a 30-day free trial subscription. We're on the radio there on Mondays, okay. Mike Church is one of them. I love Steve Bannon, okay. I trust Steve Bannon, more importantly, all right. And he has on guests that I trust. That's the War Room Pandemic. And then many other news sites that Joe and I trust. We trust like LifeSite News, okay. That's what's his name? I forgot his name. Oh, John Henry Weston, okay. LifeSite News and places like that. That's where I'm gonna only stick with that. I will say proudly, I said this on the show before. Now it's over 2 months since I watched Fox News. I won't watch Fox News unless it's like coming up with a clip like Tucker Carlson, but that you get online. You don't have to actually go on Fox News. I'm not going to Fox News anymore because they showed they're in the tank too. So again, we have to search out the media we're going to listen to, okay? But ultimately, what's going on, and I think Joe's going to get into it, okay? Another David Marcus article that he wrote about the center cannot hold. We're talking about basically we're not living in America anymore. What was the center, at least in America, okay? That not everybody's a Christian in America, but there was at least a belief in the moral law, okay? Objective moral law. Let's say pre the sexual revolution of the 1960s, there was still an adherence. There were things you could not do as a society and as an individual. You don't go beyond this point. You don't take the case of BLM and Antifa. You don't burn down buildings, okay? In other words, we'd send in the National Guard during the riots in 1967. Joe and I are both from Newark. Newark experienced a riot. They sent in the National Guard.
City's not been the same since.
Right. You don't burn down buildings, okay? We had a center in this country. So it was based on God, Judeo-Christian principles, and then it was embodied in the Constitution and the separation of powers. That's gone. That was the center. But as David Marcus points out in his article, the center, not that it cannot hold, it hasn't held. It hasn't held. It's gone. The center's gone in America.
Basically, what Marcus says is, regardless of the reasons for the rioting, what matters is the faith in society and order itself has been shattered for far too many Americans. He's spot on, because that's actually 100% on the money. Sadly, Americans lack meaning in their lives. The conservatives may love liberty, but in and of itself, liberty does not give meaning to our lives. The same is true of progressives who are searching for perfect equity, in quotations. Obviously, that's their version of equity.
Marcus could very well be watching the Frontline with Joe and Joe.
Yeah, he should be.
This is a common recurring theme on our show. We lack meaning because we refuse as a society to see that our meaning is based on God. The source of our identity and the meaning for our lives comes from God. And as Joe said a million times, we asked him to leave. And good people are not fighting to bring God back into our society. Now, he quoted Yates. Do you mind if I...
Go.
Now, he quoted Yates, and we've quoted Yates on this show before because it's an important poetic verse that William Butler Yeats wrote, okay? And this is going back well over 100 years ago. Now follow this, particularly the last stanza, okay? The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. Now catch this. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Now, Marcus, we're quoting Marcus, who's quoting Yeats, okay? But catch that. The best lack all conviction, and the worst. Who are the worst that are full of passionate intensity? We're talking about them right now. They run our government right now. They send their useful idiots out into the street in the form of BLM and Antifa. Joe, they look like some pretty passionate people to me, but they are the worst, because what they want are they represent some very, very evil ideas, some very bad and dangerous ideas.
Their ideas, I'm going to say it again. Trust me, they're not going to work long term. I'd look all of them square in the face, and this is what I say: enjoy your hour. However long that hour is, God will determine it, and I can't predict it. Enjoy it, because God will have his day.
Right.
This has been tried, as Tucker Carlson has said. I've said it even before. I got into his monologue recently on these particular riots, and I'll say it again: it will not work. It will not work, and you will fail.
And we know from history, particularly as Roman Catholics, okay, we know that God will allow, in his wisdom, okay, and in his judgment, he will allow things to happen. He will allow that scumbag devil, okay, to have free reign once in a while. And we know from our history, because it's very recent history, okay, when you look at the history of the Catholic Church, we've said it before on the show, Pope Leo XIII, he crafted the St. Michael prayer that we all pray, okay, the prayer to St. Michael. We all pray for protection. He crafted that after having a vision of Jesus and the devil having a conversation. And the devil was doing most of the talking. And he's saying, give me 100 years. I will destroy your church. Now, having said all that, it does ring true what Joe said. Who was that? Bishop Fulton Sheen? That was originally said that?
About the hour in the day?
Yeah. So it was probably Fulton Sheen quoting somebody else, but nonetheless.
It wasn't me.
Yeah, it wasn't Joe. But it's true. God will allow that hour, perhaps to see what we're going to do. Perhaps to see what we are going to do. That's why we're here. The question is, what are we prepared to do? God will allow that hour. And if we trust and do the things that we need to do, okay, we know and we hope, we have our hope in him, okay, he will have his day. Justice. We will see God's justice. That is one of the joys of heaven, is to see God's justice and all of the injustices that have occurred in all of human history. This is no different. These people are no more powerful than the Stalins, the Hitlers, the Neros, the Diocletians. They're no more powerful than them.
And also what Marcus is basically saying is we have to not focus on short-term like pleasures. Maybe that's why God is permitting this. I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I'm going to do what I did yesterday, and I'm going to do what every day. I'm going to pray my rosary, I'm going to go to church, and I'm going to go to confession regularly. That's what I did before Donald Trump was the president. While Barack Obama was the president, that's what I did when Donald Trump was the president, and that's what I'm going to do when Joe Biden's the president. Because ultimately, I don't control the outcome. But what Marcus is saying in his article is we have to focus on things that are substantive. You see, society, that's why we're here in this particular spot in history. Man has forgotten God. That's what Solzhenitsyn said when basically this was tried in the early 20th century in the Soviet Union. For over 40 years, 1 in 10 Russians were put in a gulag. 1 in 10. He was, by the way. He wrote a letter to his friend, and he made a reference. It wasn't even a direct statement. It was a reference against Stalin. He got 10 years in prison, hard labor. And then afterwards, he was exiled from his family after he was released from prison. 1 in 10 people over 4 decades after the 1917 revolution took place in the Soviet Union. So maybe God is having us go through this to get into things that are a little bit more substantive, like family, like turn off the television, turn off the computer. Not when we're on the computer.
Yeah. Make sure you keep the computer on when the Frontline with Joe and Joe are on.
My point is countless hours of basically scrolling. Read a book. Go to church. Read the Psalms. Pray the rosary. Fast. Where are your priorities? What's important to you? You see, man forgets about God when he gets comfortable, and that's exactly where we're at.
You just described the United States of America.
And that's what Marcus is saying.
We're too fat. We're too comfortable. Okay? We don't do anything. We let them. Listen, they can only have this kind of power because we've allowed it. Now, part of that is because we trusted the wrong people. Don't get me wrong. Okay? I'm not blaming, pointing fingers at all you good people out there. The blame goes our way too. We trusted the wrong people. We trusted the Republican Party. We thought they were going to be a balance against the left, because the Democrats have been overtaken by the hard left for 50 years. It didn't just happen yesterday.
And Tom, in the chat room, we've interviewed E. Michael Jones. You could actually go on our Frontline with Joe and Joe YouTube page. You could see that interview.
Yeah, that was a good conversation we had with him about his new book, Logos Rising. And we're going to have another conversation with him in early February with another individual, Dr. Marek. And we're going to talk to them about how the EU is trying to put the clamp down on Hungary and Poland, who are basically exerting and expressing their Christian identity, especially when it comes to immigration and when it comes to the sexual revolution. I want to finish this just with one thing that Marcus said that says exactly what you were saying, but I like the way he puts it, okay? And I think it's important. See, this is why we all need to put, except when Joe and Joe are on, all right? This is why we all need to turn off the TVs and the computers and read more. Read more, okay? Particularly scripture, okay? But read more. Marcus said, now, this is along the lines of what Joe was just saying. This is very beautifully put. He said, look up. Look up to see your neighbors. How much don't we do that anymore? That we don't. I don't even get a greet. So I live in an apartment building. There's over 1,000 people in the apartment building. And it's very few people that even say hello to you in the morning when you're going out to warm up your car. Look up to see your neighbors. Look up to see the miracle of breezes fanned by swaying branches, to the shifting snow falling faintly. Look up to God and know that your life has meaning. Those are very good words. Those are very good words.
But it's the truth. I mean, we've forgotten that as a nation. And frankly, I've said this a million times, the answer isn't going to come politically. It's not. I got news for you. Even if Donald Trump was to be the president again, that's not our answer. It's just a stopgap. It's a stopgap. The culture needs to change. Politics is downstream from the culture. We have forgotten who we are as a nation. When we return to that identity, we've never actually been a perfect nation, but we've taken God a little bit more seriously. In the 50s, after World War II, 70% of Catholics went to church. 70. Now 30% do. That's just speaking from the Catholic Church's perspective. You want to talk about a scandal? 7 out of 10 Catholics do not go to Mass, which means they're living in mortal sin because you have to go to Mass. It's a requirement. So that's a scandal. And to be honest with you, when we recognize that Christ is the King of our country, as Poland recently consecrated its country to Christ the King, then things will change. Until then, nothing will change.
Hungary has Jesus Christ in their constitution also.
Good.
Okay? And this is what is important. But the EU, the oligarchs, the ones we're dealing with, are the same ones they're dealing with over there. They're not having any of that. And what did I say? What the reason why? Mainly because of sexual liberation. They are not tolerating abortion. They are not tolerating gay marriage. They're not tolerating gender ideology. You see, they're doing what we are saying, have been saying on the show. The answer is no. I'm not negotiating with you on abortion. I'm not negotiating with you on gay marriage. I'm not negotiating with you on this gender ideology. I'm not. The answer is no. You're not teaching it in the public schools. Okay? And if as a function of the free market, if Hollywood is going to produce that nonsense, then we need to abandon Hollywood. We should be doing it anyway. But the answer is no, and Poland and Hungary get it. Hopefully this is a wake-up call for us. Okay, hopefully this is a wake-up call for us that we're going to get our heads out of our butts, all right, and we're going to start saying no to these people. Now, we did, at least on a political level, all right, on election night. Trump won the election. I say David Perdue won his election as Senate race in Georgia on election night. Martha McSally won in Arizona. They should have never, ever conceded that, ever, okay? So the American people spoke, but that was on the political level. We're talking on the spiritual level. You want to defeat this evil? We need to be spiritually ready. We need to be. Do we have to be perfect? Of course, Christ says we ought to be perfect.
No, you got to be in a state of grace.
You got to be in a state of grace.
How do you do that? You go to confession. If you're Catholic and you hear our voice, you should go to confession. It's at the bare minimum, you're required to go to confession once a year. That's per the catechism.
That's right.
That's the bare minimum. I mean,
and receive the Eucharist once a year.
Correct.
But you still have to go to Mass every Sunday.
But I mean, at the same time, that's how you live a sacramental life. And that's what we need to do. There's our answer. There is our answer. I'm telling you, Christ is the answer, and the sacraments are the medicine. And this is something we've said, and I'm going to go on to our next subject. We got to talk about COVID. I don't want to beat this to death, but you know, Christ came because we're a mess. Man is his worst enemy. He is. And the church is the hospital. You see, the church isn't for perfect people. I'm Catholic because I'm imperfect. I recognize that imperfection. And we have to stop arguing amongst ourselves. We've said this on shows. I'm talking about within the Catholic Church. There are problems. Of course there are problems. I got news for you. What are you doing about the problems other than bitching? And what I do, I fast. That's what I do. Why don't you do that? There are good priests. Find one. There are good churches. Find one. And don't support churches and bishops that aren't good. And basically pray and fast and leave it to God, and he will fix it. It's the same thing with our country. If you want to fix our country, the politician is not going to solve your problems. It's when the culture recognizes Christ. And when will that happen? When they recognize holiness in you. In you. You see, they've heard all the arguments, but they haven't seen holiness. Mm-hmm. People haven't seen it. When they do, they remember it. And when they do, people change.
That's right. Speaking of change, I just want to address this because he's a spiritual brother. Joker No is in the chat room. Says, I'm struggling with sin, but I'm definitely fighting it. That's all we could do. Sin, I always quote Catechism, I believe it's 409, okay, where the church in the Catechism talks about, basically defines human history, all right, and what it is. It's not class warfare. Not so Marx was wrong about that, okay? What it is a struggle. It is a struggle with sin. The church calls it a dour combat with the forces of evil. Now, Joe just said, we're our own worst enemy, okay? And we fall into sin, and in some points in our lives, those sins become habitual. We have to make an attempt to create, as Aquinas would have said, good habits, okay? Good habits are developed. They develop because we are flesh and blood. We get used to something, well, then we have to get unused to it by developing good habits, virtuous habits, okay? Your struggle, here's my point to you, Joker. Don't ever, I'm not that you are, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Don't ever despair of Christ's mercy, okay? Don't ever despair of Christ's mercy. Ask him for the grace. Ask him for the, he'll give it to you on his time, okay? Perhaps you have something, maybe all of us have to struggle with something, okay? Something out there we're struggling with. But the church says that's the battle to be fought, and it's only with God's grace. Only with God's grace. Basically, our will, aided by God's grace, that helps us to overcome that and restore our integrity as human beings. I wanted to say that to you because ultimately, Joker, and for everybody to know, Joe and I are not just here to talk about politics, okay? We're Catholic men who want to evangelize this culture. That was our stated goal from the beginning. When I see a comment like that, I'm going to comment on it. Joker, keep the faith, stay close to confession, ask Christ for his forgiveness, and struggle through it. And we're going to be praying for you, brother.
Well, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the COVID situation. There's been a couple of interesting developments. One is in New York State. There was a New York bill that was proposed in the assembly that would allow health officials to detain suspected disease carriers for 60 days and force vaccines. How nice. Welcome to China, Joe Pacello.
Wait, China or New York?
Yes. Well, let me give you, in case you haven't heard about it, let me run it down. I'll give you the bill. The bill is A416.
Now
It's in the assembly.
Now again, we're talking on the show about the audacity of the left, okay? In how they're using, let's say for argument's sake, all these different pretexts to get what they really want. Joe's about to tell you what they really want. It's got nothing to do with COVID, but listen to what they're going to do to you and to us. Well, I work in New York, so potentially it could happen to me.
A Democratic assemblyman in New York has proposed a bill that would allow the governor and a state health official to mandate COVID-19 vaccines and to detain anyone deemed, and this is in quotations in the bill, a danger to public health. The legislation is titled Bill A416. Look it up after the show. Again, it's A416. It's sponsored by Assemblyman Nick Perry, and it will be referred to the New York Assembly Health Committee. Bill A416 would enable the governor or his delegates, including...
Very ambiguous. Who are the delegates? Go ahead.
Including, but not limited to, the commissioner or the heads of local health departments, these are in quotation marks, this is in the bill, to order, this is in the bill as well, to order the removal or detention of anyone, this is also in the bill, that presents a potential danger to the health of others in officials' estimation. That is scary. That basically means that if you have a corrupt person that they want to get rid of you for 60 days, they could just drum up something and put you in detention.
And nobody's telling you who the delegates are. They're not saying, are they qualified to be delegates? That's Cuomo doing his best Xi Jinping impersonation and saying, basically what the law is saying, that if he points the finger at somebody and wants them to be detained in this way for 60 days, all he's got to do is look to anybody on his staff and say, I'm making you a delegate. Go and declare that person unsafe to be in society, and we're going to detain them for 60 days. And this is what the fake, I could curse, and I'm not supposed to curse, how we put up with this effing media in this country. All right. And this is what we have to listen to. That Cuomo gets awards. He writes a book. In other words, touting his leadership during COVID. Let me tell you something about Andrew Cuomo. Okay. He's a gangster, along with his brother. Okay, but his brother's not a governor. Sammy the Bull Gravano was a serial killer. He basically was John Gotti's underboss. Okay, he killed 19 people. Okay, went into witness protection after he testified against John Gotti, and now he lives somewhere out west. Andrew Cuomo, by that stick. No, he's not in prison.
No, he got caught. He was selling. He was in Arizona.
Was that recent?
Oh, he's been in jail again.
He's out.
Oh, he's out again?
Somebody told me he's actually. I don't know how true it is. Somebody told me he actually attends mass. That good. He actually is repentant.
Good.
I say good. But I bring up Sammy the Bull because he killed 19 people. Okay, and that's what we have on record. Andrew Cuomo killed thousands of old people by a deliberate act. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because Andrew Cuomo committed a deliberate act to send people who had COVID into nursing homes where people were most susceptible to COVID. And he's an effing hero? This is what we have to put up with in this country. Now he wants to have your neighbor. He'll have one of your neighbors. He'll declare one of your neighbors a delegate to have you locked up for 60 days if you refuse to wear a mask. Or if you had the, I was in the shoe store over Christmas, okay? And I'm sitting there waiting for my wife, and again, I had my face in the phone. I was looking for news, and I had the mask on up to here. And the lady walked by, it's got to cover your whole face. I wanted to say thank you, Commissar. Thank you very much for that. Here you go. But can you believe this legislation? And then people say, what are you Republicans and conservatives so afraid of? This! Bill A4, 416? That's what we're afraid of. I don't want to get locked up for 60 days. Andrew Cuomo says you can be.
Detainment could occur in a medical facility or other appropriate facilities or premises designated by the governor or his or her delegee, though this is in the bill. Moreover, a person could be taken into custody of the department merely for being this is in the bill as well, suspected case or suspected carrier, putting additional weight on often wildly unreliable COVID-19 tests. Bill A416 also allows the governor and state officials to let detainees who challenged their confinement to continue for more than 5 business days in isolation in the absence of a court or authorizing detention.
Does that not sound like a gulag to you? He mentioned Solzhenitsyn before. I don't know of a better example of a gulag. We're going to lock you up, and if you open your mouth about it, we're going to put you in the hole for 5 days. They don't do that to murderers. They don't do that to rapists. And they're going to do that to somebody who's wearing their mask here instead of here, because their neighbor, who Disgraziad Cuomo delegates as a delegate, okay, as an authority, will rat you out, and you're going to be in confinement for 60 days. And if you complain, you're going in the hole for 5 days. Again, what's the question I asked earlier, Joe Resinello? This is America? That's what this is?
The bill also quietly seeks to initiate compulsory vaccinations and other state-ordered treatment, while purporting, I'm sorry, I stumbled there, to grant virtually unlimited power to the governor and his delegates. The governor and his or her delegee may, in his or her discretion, issue and seek enforcement or any other orders that he or she determines are necessary or appropriate to prevent dissemination or transmission of contagious diseases or other illnesses that may pose a threat to the public health, and to require an individual who has been exposed to or infected by a contagious disease to complete an appropriate prescribed course of treatment, including preventative medication and vaccination.
Now catch this. After everything Joe just read, Dan says in the chat room, I thought they released prisoners because of the COVID pandemic. Right, Dan. They let the prisoners out because that's what communists do. The first thing they do is empty the jails because they want all the violent people on the street because they need the unrest that we were talking about earlier. So they emptied the prisons out, and now Cuomo wants to fill them back up with people like you and me. Because we say, hey, I'm walking on the street. There's nobody. I walk at night. In other words, when I walk to work, there's more people on the street than when I leave work, okay, because I work nights. When I'm in the afternoon, I avoid everybody around me, okay, and I don't wear a mask when I'm on the street. Now, in my job, I have to wear a mask, okay, because my boss tells me to. At night, there's nobody around, all right, very few people. There's nobody around. Now, according to this, if the halal guy that's there sees me, and he wants to call up 911 and call the cops and say, that guy's not wearing a mask, according to this legislation, I got to get quarantined for 60 days, and if I beef about it, I'm going in the hole for 5. And this is not a gulag? This is not them exerting the iron fist right in your face?
And I'll be honest with you, when Biden gets the chair, I'll be truthful with you, because this is what put him in the chair, was they instilled fear in people. Because in all honesty, there are people that are terrified of this. And to be truthful with you, I respect them. I'm not here to terrorize you. You know, I'm concerned for my mother. She's 80.
That's a different story.
But at the same time, and I wear the mask when I go into stores because you have to. You can't get in.
In Jersey,
you can't do anything. You won't go. You couldn't go into a bank.
I got kicked out of Dunkin' Donuts.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So like you unless you want to live on a hill in Arkansas. You know, in Jersey, literally, you can't do anything inside anywhere. You'll be thrown out, or the police will come and take you away.
Mm-hmm.
However, my point is, this administration got in because of this. They're not playing games, people. And we're going to cover a story after this to show you what's going on internationally, to give you a taste of what's going on in Canada, because we have a lot of followers in Canada. What could come here? Because I'll be truthful with you. This is for real. This is for real. Mm-hmm. And Biden is at the minimum going to have a 100-day mask requirement, and that's going to be everywhere. That's going to be on the sidewalk as well as in the stores. And I'll tell you what, if you defy it and you get the wrong cop, and that's going to be from Alaska to New Jersey, you're going to get fined. And in Canada, you're fined up towards 4,700 US, 6,000 Canadian. That's no joke.
Right.
And that's the law. So like this is an extreme, because New York is an extreme, but Joe Biden's getting the chair.
They never do anything temporarily. Remember, they were supposed to bend the curve, 2 weeks to bend the curve. They always move the goalpost. Joe Biden is saying, it's about public health. We don't want people to die. Now this is a bad impersonation, but I'm slouching over my shoulders because when he said it, he was like this, and he was pleading. It was almost like some non-Italian version of Don Corleone. He's going, because people will die. So what are we asking for? We're asking for 100 days. They're not asking for 100 days. They're asking for the rest of your life. That mask will become part of our everyday existence. Don't you get it? And what does the mask represent that you're going to have to remind yourself of every time you put it on? That you are no longer a free man or a free woman. That mask is the symbol of political control that they have over you. So it won't be 100 days, because in 190 days, they'll say we need to extend it 100 days and another 100 days, and the fines will go up, and people will start going to prison. And that fear that Joe was talking about is going to turn into not fear of COVID, it's going to be fear of the government. And by the way, I didn't mean to contradict you earlier, because I agree. My mother's 81, Joe's mom's 81, okay? And for high-risk people like that, okay, I agree 1,000% to protect those people who are vulnerable to this virus, okay? So I want to be clear about that. But when it comes to the fear that people are showing, like when you're walking down the street and somebody walks around you and they look at you strangely. I haven't had anybody confront me yet and yell at me like you see some of those videos on the internet, okay? But why do they fear? Why do they fear? Why does anybody fear death? I used to fear death. You know why I used to fear death? I feared death because I wasn't close to God. And I can admit that to myself. I say a million times, had I died in my 20s or 30s, I probably would have been in hell. And I feared death. I don't fear death anymore. Now, I don't want to be brazen. I'm going to wear a mask in a store. I'm going to wear my mask at work because the boss tells me to. I don't wear it when I'm on the street and nobody's around, okay? I'm going to play the game for a little while. But at the end of the day, I don't fear COVID because I don't fear death. I don't want to get it, and I don't want to die tomorrow. I want to do things with my life for the rest of my life. But that's Joe's point and what he's always saying. The fear that we have in this country is because God is not a part of the equation. You're so fearful of death. In other words, because that's it. Your comfortable life comes to an end. And you have no hope in any afterlife because you refuse to believe in God. And that's why people fear so much. That's why fear works with a lot of people, because they don't have God and they need God.
Well, talking a little bit about what's happening internationally, because there's a number of people who are saying basically what I just echoed about Quebec, what's happening there. In Quebec, the government is imposing an overnight curfew, which began on January 9th and will last at least until February 8th, ostensibly to reduce the spread of COVID. Quebecois, the Quebec people, introduced by law enforcement outside their homes, if you're out there without good reason between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m., will be suspected. You basically can get fines upwards to 1,000 to 6,000 Canadian or $850 to 4,700 US. Quebec's official website warns that people outside their residence must justify their travels. Specifics to such justifications are not provided by the authorities. Anyone will be prohibited from moving outside their place of residence, except in cases or exemptions that justify the move. For example, the benefit of health care, for humanitarian reasons, or to carry out considered a priority. This is serious. You cannot go outside your house from 8 o'clock to 5 a.m. in Quebec. I read this. I was blown away. In terms of visiting people, well, let me just go on. In November, Quebec shut down businesses. This will give Americans a taste of what's going on in a liberal government, which could easily happen here. In November, Quebec shut down businesses and other operations arbitrarily deemed non-essential. The province does not provide a framework outlining how distinctions between essential and non-essential are made. The latest lockdown decree forbids people from visiting, get this, from visiting anyone else at another address outside of these four categories. A single visitor from another address for a single person. One person visiting one person. A caregiver, people providing service or support, and lastly, labor for planned work. Outside of that, you cannot go anywhere else outside your home. Churches and houses of worship are prohibited. I'll repeat that again. They're not essential. They're prohibited.
This is in
You
Quebec.
cannot go to church, which was one time such a Catholic country. An exception was granted for funerals. They allow 10 persons to go to a funeral.
Oh, how generous of them.
And for the record, the province acknowledged it can't point to a specific study on the effectiveness of curfews in limiting the spread of the virus. And that's in the Toronto Star, which is a left-wing newspaper. You see, Joe Biden is in lockstep with this liberal government. And this is the type of thing that could easily happen here. Easily.
Well, as
and I'm
we
going to tell you
described it,
this.
I mean, they're proposing it already, like Cuomo with his legislation.
Absolutely.
So they're proposing it already.
And I'm going to tell you this. Mark my words. Trust me. I've been around the block. They mean it. This is not a joke. Like, okay, you don't want to do it? Then you're going to go to jail. You don't want to do it? Then you're going to pay a fine.
Right.
That's civil disobedience, by the way. That's part of the deal. So they mean it. This is serious.
That's right.
These cats are not playing games.
They're not playing games because they're stone cold Stalinists and Maoists. That's what they are. What we mentioned earlier, everybody here who's listening to us at the front line with Joe and Joe knows how many people died in the last 100 years because of these regimes. 100 million people. 100 million people. There's no value for human life. Remember, struggle, materialism, atheism. That means you're toast. Because in their struggle, they'll put a bullet in your head. You're only the material that makes up your body. You don't have a soul. And don't worry about going to heaven or hell because there is no God. That's their worldview. And they're true believers. Let me give a quick shout out. We're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello. Yeah, man, we're way in the breach. Sunday nights, 8 o'clock. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We're on Holy Faith Media. I don't know. Somebody said Parler's been shut down completely. We're not on Parler. I mean, we have a page on Parler, but you can't stream there right now. But please, for now, like, subscribe, share, Holy Faith Media, Frontline with Joe and Joe on YouTube and Facebook, and do all that fun stuff. And we got a lot of our friends. Julius, I saw Julius in the chat room. I haven't seen him in a while. We got too many people to get to. Suffice it to say, we love you all, and God bless you. We got a couple more stories we want to get to.
Well, we wanted to just touch upon this story with regard to COVID because the rich are getting richer as a result of the pandemic. I wanted to break down a few numbers for you guys.
This is staggering.
The world's 500 richest billionaires collectively added an eye-opening $1.8 trillion of wealth in 2020, in direct contrast to the many small and mid-sized businesses worldwide forced to close due to government-imposed COVID-19 lockdowns. At the top of the richest list is Amazon's CEO Jeff Bezos, whose estimated net worth rose in 2020 to $186 billion.
Is that post-divorce? So
Actually,
he might
it
actually
is.
be
It is.
worth more, or would have been worth more
Yes.
had he not gotten divorced. So we could throw another $50 billion on that. I think that's what his ex-wife got.
He is followed by the Tesla CEO, Elon Musk, whose worth rose in 2020 to $175 billion.
Now catch this statistic. At the beginning of 2020, Elon Musk was worth $20 billion. And in 2020, he's now worth $170 billion. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Microsoft, Bill Gates is, the former CEO. He actually came in third. It's the first time in the Bloomberg Index that he actually came in third. He's worth $131 billion. And Zuckerberg is the fifth richest man in the world, and he's worth $104 billion.
What a piker he is, man. And these are the oligarchs, and these are the guys that are running everything now. That's what you have. In other words, and with, particularly when you're talking about Bezos, look, he's trying to shut down Parler because Amazon does his web hosting. So he's trying to shut down Parler completely. So a free speech website. So if you're a communist, you could go on there. If you're a fascist, you could go on there. If you're a Jew, if you're a Catholic, if you're an atheist, you could go on there. They're not a right-wing website, but they are for the left. You want to know why? Because what they are is a free speech website. Free speech now is considered right-wing because obviously we know that the left does not value free speech. And these guys, I mean, we need to figure something out in this country to stop putting money in their pockets. We have to figure something out. I don't want Jeff Bezos making any more money off me. He might still be rich. That's fine. I don't want him making any money off Joe or me or you or my wife or Joe's wife. I don't want him to make any more money off us or Zuckerberg or any one of us. That's why we're trying to wean off. But you see how vicious they are? You got a free speech website called Parler, and they want to take that down. And if the government doesn't step in, if the Department of Justice doesn't step in and go after them as either utilities or monopolies or Section 230 or anything to take away their power, I don't know how we're going to communicate with one another.
Well, this next story I think is very interesting. Joe alluded to it in the beginning of the show. It's basically coming from the Ivy League. Something good from the Ivy League, if you ask me. It's a professor from Brown University. His name is Glenn Loury. And there's a professor from Columbia University. His name is John McWhorter. They're both African Americans. And basically what they're doing is they're calling out the anti-racist activists, particularly Ibrahim Kendi, who we've discussed some things that he has said on this show in the past. Not to point him out, because there's many anti-racist activists out there. Just basically look at many of the liberal channels, MSNBC, CNN.
They're race hucksters.
And these are black men, and they're obviously highly intelligent. They teach at in the Ivy League.
I'm surprised the hammer hasn't dropped on them.
Probably will.
Probably will.
But basically what they're saying is you have to call the bluff of these anti-racist activists.
And I like the way he puts this. Go ahead, Joe. They call their bluff. Stop. Before you go on, I said last week, we have to start acting like rhinos, not Republicans in name only. The animal rhinos. Because when rhinos stampede through the jungle, they get hit with twigs and, not twigs, branches. They get stuck with things, but they got skin this thick, and they just keep moving forward. Charges of like racism that come from people like Ibram Kendi, okay? In other words, you got to let that stuff bounce right off you. And that's what Joe's about to get into, that Glenn Loury and John McWhorter were talking about, two African Americans who's telling you. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, again, and this is why I think their voice is so powerful, is because they're African American and they've basically succeeded in life. I mean, they're at the highest levels of academia teaching. And basically what they're saying is, as black men, and in that community, this is what Loury said, that no one talks about the real issues that face the community. And those issues basically is the status of the black family, or underperformance of black students, or basically
black on black crime. Right?
Yes. And what is the root of that? And after, it's basically there's no father in the home. Only 3 out of 10 African American families in America have a father. Now, white families aren't much better. We only have 5 out of 5. So I'm not picking on, I'm just stating statistics. There are 5 out of 10 white men that are not in their home with their children. And there are 7 African Americans. He's addressing it in that community, basically saying the anti-racist activists don't address that problem. That's the root of all our problems, whether you're white or you're black in America. It's fatherlessness. It's fatherlessness. You need to have a father in the home. When a father is in the home, the likelihood that your kid goes to jail, whether you're black or white, is much lower. The likelihood that your kid graduates high school is much higher. This is a fact.
Right.
It creates, basically, and also the likelihood that if the father goes to church, the children will have a strong belief in God. It's exponentially higher than if just the mother goes to church.
Right.
It is vital. It is vital. And like I said, in the 50s, when men came back from World War II, and they said, and I had many uncles that did, including my grandfather, they said, thank God I'm alive. Thank God I'm alive. And 7 out of 10 American men who were Catholic went to church. And what Loury is basically saying is that's the heart of the problem. And in that community, it's never talked about.
Well, he's saying that's their agreement.
Well,
that's their tacit agreement that they have, because because nobody in polite company wants to bring these things up. So if you're at a cocktail party, don't mention black on black crime, and I won't mention it either. Don't mention fatherlessness in the black community, I won't either. Don't mention underperformance in the public schools, and I won't either. They have this tacit agreement because those who know that there's a problem there, if they open their mouth, will be called racist by people like Ibram Kendi. And what Lowry and McWhorter are saying is they're bluffing.
And why
they'll back down. He said if white people open their mouth and join people like them, he says they will back down.
And why this is powerful is they're black men. You see, white men have to call out the 5 out of 10 that aren't in their home either. You know, I don't want to just make this conversation. It's not just about black people. It's about all people. All people. Fathers, you have a child and you get married, you make a vow before God. I got news for you. This is something like, I mean, I'm aware of it. I mean, I'm married 7 years. You know, what did Christ say to the woman at the well? He said, you've had 5 husbands. You see, we can get divorced in this country. You can go, you could leave your wife, you can go get married again legally. You could do that. But when you stand before God, he's going to say, that's not your wife. You see, that's what Christ said to that woman at the well. That's not your husband. You've had 5 husbands. Mm-hmm. You see, you make a vow before God. Whether you like it or not, you're married. You're married. And this is what I'm talking about. So don't do things to destroy your marriage. You see, that's another thing that keeps people outside of basically falling into this particular development. They don't think like that. You have to think like that. There is no divorce in God's eyes. You see, Americanism accepts no-fault divorce.
Even amongst many Catholics and evangelicals, unfortunately.
There is no divorce in God's eyes. You go, you get married, unless the marriage wasn't sacramental and you get a rightful annulment, and that's real. You know, because
it happens.
Actually, many marriages aren't sacramental. I absolutely believe that. Because frankly, people go into it, they don't understand marriage, and frankly, in many cases, sadly, I think the church doesn't articulate what the marriage, commitment really is. You know, it's not that you're lonely. You're lonely, get a dog. Marriage is not about that. Marriage is a vocation. And what they're talking about is it comes down to fatherlessness. Again, 3 out of 10 black men are in their home with their children, and 5 out of 10 white men are in their home. This is a problem.
Major problem.
In our country. That's and right. They're addressing it, and I wanted to give a shout out to them. I think it's a great thing what they're doing, and frankly, I think white guys got to call it out too. It's not just the black community, it's all guys.
Yeah.
You got to call it out. You got to call it out, because this will take, you know something? A married couple could be very simple. See, we get it wrong as Americans. We focus on things that don't mean crap. You know, you could work at ShopRite. You could be married, you could have 3 kids, and you could live in a garden apartment your entire life. And I've known people like this, to be completely honest with you. Very simple people. I've grown up with people like that. Do you know they're so nice? They're good people. They're healthy. They came from good homes. Their families weren't fancy. And frankly, the product of those, they're still not fancy. They're good people. They're married. They're healthy. They're happy. And they die with dignity. What I like to call it is, it's basically the art of living. We've lost that.
Yeah.
And we've lost it on every level. Not just the poor, but the rich. We've lost that because we don't know who we are anymore. You see, that's how life used to be. Like my great aunts and great uncles. I used to go to Irvington, New Jersey, where my grandfather lived when I was a little boy. And all of them, they lived in 3-family houses. They didn't have
all on top of each other.
Yeah, I mean, but you know something? They're married 50, 60 years. They had kids. They worked hard. You know what I'm saying? They died with dignity.
Right.
They had grandchildren.
And their lives had meaning and purpose.
Gone.
And that's why we're at the front line with Joe and Joe, because Americans are convinced, not all of us, a lot of Americans are convinced that our lives have no meaning. And that's a major problem. I think somebody just commented, David the Hermit is in the chat room.
Is that Father David Nix?
I don't know.
I think it is. Isn't it?
Maybe.
If it is, I think
it is. Hey, Father Nix. David the Hermit said, this nation is Sodom and Gomorrah times 100. I only would disagree. We're on the road to that. But I think there are many good people in America. Remember, and as you probably know, because you're referencing scripture, there were no good people in Sodom and Gomorrah. There were, or at least there weren't 10. Okay, because Abraham begged the Lord not to destroy it if he could find 10 righteous men. Am I right? 10?
Yeah.
All right. There's a lot of good people in America. There's a lot of good people who are on the front lines. We are not there yet. There is hope for America. Okay, if you value America and you believe God values America. I don't believe we're going to be destroyed. Okay, not completely, not Sodom and Gomorrah. Do I think we're going to be chastised? Yeah. And again, I'm not saying because God could do what God wants to do, okay? And we might not survive the chastisement, okay? As long as we go to heaven, that's all that matters to us. But I don't think we're Sodom and Gomorrah yet because we still can fight. That's the purpose of fighting this culture war because we know that we could win it if we just take the proper perspective, all right? Do the things we need to do and get out there and get into the breach. I just want to make one other point. How many stories?
Just one. We've been going. It's been a long show, but we had a lot to talk about. I'm sorry.
I do want to say this because I and I think many of you know, Joe and I have black wives. Both of our wives are sisters. Okay, Joe is my brother-in-law. Okay, so I don't say that for any other reason to say that it's impossible. And somebody did call us racist, I think, a month ago, and the chat room was like, it's impossible. But my point is this: the idea. I think this is a good quote from David Marcus. It's a good way to end this, okay? The idea that the solution to crime, poverty, and academic underperformance among black Americans will be addressed or will be fixed by addressing vague and amorphous notions of systemic racism and privilege is absurd, okay? Now, this is what John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry are pointing out. The quicker we blow these myths up and these lies up, the better off we'll be, and we can move forward as far as race relations in this country, okay? And I just wanted to say that Joe and I are right there with you. In other words, we're ready to blow up those lies because that's what Ibram Kendi and people like them do. Because Ibram Kendi is not a black man first. He is a leftist first. Let's get that through our heads.
Let's talk about, we began the show with Tucker Carlson, and we're going to end it with Tucker Carlson. He recently interviewed Tulsi Gabbard, and to be honest with you, she surprised me by this. She commented on the new House gender-neutral language. Now, she's a Democrat, Tulsi Gabbard, and she had some very strong things to say on Tucker's show. She basically said that the House rules that eliminate gender language do the very opposite of empowering women. And it's the height of hypocrisy for people who claim to be champions of rights for women to deny the very biological essence of women. She added, when you look at why Title IX was created, it was created out of this recognition that there is a biological distinction between men and women and boys and girls. This is Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat, talking right now. And she said, it recognized that because of that, there needs to be a level playing field for girls and women to be able to compete and play in sports. There are people who are trying to undermine the very reason why Title IX was put in place by denying my existence, this is her talking, denying the existence of biological women. It defies common sense. It defies basic established science. Now, getting to the gender-neutral language, this was established by Nancy Pelosi at the very start of the new House. She basically said you can't use terms like mother. You can't use a term like mother.
Or brother.
That is crazy.
You have to say parent.
That is craziness.
Or sibling.
And I'll be honest with you. This is, and I'm so glad that Tulsi Gabbard called it out because one, she's a woman, and two, she's a Democrat. This is craziness, and this is where where we're at in this country. I can't even believe it. I can't even believe it. 10 years ago, this would have been like, even under Barack Obama's administration,
regime,
people would have been like, what the hell are you talking about? I can't say mother in the House of Representatives.
I would, me personally, I'd let them censure me. I would just say it all day long. I would look at Nancy Pelosi and say, hi, mother. Like I would say, hi, sister. No, seriously, I would just cause trouble. I don't know why people don't cause trouble. They cause all the trouble on the left with crap like this. And you get Republicans who just kind of like, well, we'll fight against her. You got to get in her face and say, absolutely not. What are you talking about? Speech codes in the United States Congress. I can't use mother and father, brother and sister. Are you smoking crack?
No, but I think it's craziness, and it's sad. It's very sad. And this is where we are. And this is where we are. You know, why are we surprised, though? Why are we surprised? As I said when we talked about the riots, I wasn't surprised what took place. I wasn't surprised. Because we've thrown God out of our society. And politics is not going to solve it. I got news for you. Politics is not going to solve it. Who's going to solve it? Saints. Saints change the society, and I believe God will raise men and women in that direction. Look what happened, in history. God brought Charlemagne on the scene. He brought King, what's it called? Who's in France?
St. Louis.
St. Louis the Ninth. He brought Joan of Arc on the scene. We have to strive for holiness. I'm telling you, that's the answer, people. I'm telling you, trust me. Double down on your prayer life. Double down on your fasting. Fast once a day for the church. Fast and pray. Christ said that. We have to strive for holiness. You see, because holiness is attractive. It is. It's attractive. You see, it gives weight to our words. When you're holy and you speak, people will listen. What was said in Scripture when Christ spoke? People would listen because they always said, because he spoke unlike the scribes and Pharisees, because he spoke with authority. You see, this is what holiness does, and this is what and here's the beautiful thing about it. Anyone could strive for holiness. Anyone could be holy. Now, what's the rosary, the mystery? When I always pray it, it's in the joyful mysteries, the fourth mystery. It's the presentation. I always call it in my head. It's the mystery of the ordinary people. It's regular people who are in church day and night praying. And what did they recognize when a poor couple walked in with a child? They said, "That's God." They saw it. Why did they see it? Because they were holy and they were normal. They were regular people. You see, that could be us. Christ chose regular men, 12 of them. He didn't choose people with deep resumes. You have to be willing. You have to get out of the boat and you have to allow God to transform you, but you can't transform yourself, which goes against the individualism of Americanism, which thinks that and we're so full of ourselves. Everyone's got degrees and everyone likes to tell you they got them. Well, guess what? That's not what's going to change America. What's going to change America is holiness, and the sacraments are the medicine. We just have to submit ourselves to that. Bend our knee. Bend our knee. I'm not the answer. You are God, and I'm going to listen to you. That's how we do it. That's how we change America. That's how we make America great.
I'm going to disagree with Joe on one thing. We got plenty of degrees. We got degrees in common sense, PhDs, master's degrees,
there you go,
bachelor's, all of it, all right up the line. And all of you do too. That's why you're listening to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. This was a long conversation. This was a great conversation, okay? And we thank you all. We just passed 1,000 messages, so obviously we got you buzzing. We've had, as far as people actually watching, at the same time, over 250 consistently the whole time. So this is going to reach at least 10,000 people when it's all said and done. I'll say probably over the next couple of days, which is great. Which is great. We thank you. We pray to God. We pray to Our Lady. We pray to St. Joseph for the success of this show. Why? Because Joe and I want to make money and have all sorts of followers on YouTube. Yeah, we'd like a lot of followers on YouTube, and we don't care if we make a dime.
And I don't care.
I don't care.
If we have, to be honest with you, don't worry. Mother Teresa said that. Don't worry about numbers. Worry about being faithful. Worry about being faithful. And if they come for you, give them something to convict you on. You see, we've already crossed the Rubicon. People said, are you going to stop this, whatever. We've already crossed the Rubicon.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? We're going to go. We're going to be faithful. Let's be faithful. Leave the success to God. If we all take that mantra, you know something? We'll change this country.
That's right.
We sure will.
We sure will. This country's not finished yet, and it'll be good people like us that are going to step up, and we're going to jump into that breach in the culture war as often as we can, boldly proclaiming the truth on all these issues. on all of them. So we want to thank you for joining us at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. Please, as I asked earlier, like, subscribe, follow, share, tell your friends, all that fun stuff. It's very easy. The Frontline with Joe and Joe. You find us on Facebook. You find us on YouTube. Also, Holy Faith Media. Many of you are watching us on Holy Faith Media. Please like, subscribe, and share, and all the same things with Holy Faith Media. Jonathan Ross has a great lineup of shows that he produces on Holy Faith Media, not just the Frontline with Joe and Joe. And please also check out the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Sign up for a 30-day free trial subscription. Joe and I gain nothing from that, but we're on that radio station once a week for 3 hours on Mondays, late Monday afternoon. So please check all that out. And we want to thank you once again for listening to us tonight. Like I said, it was a great conversation. And remember, until next week, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you guys next week.